My name is James Kidd, or Jim Kidd. I live on Garden Street in West Newbury. I was born in Passaic, New Jersey in 1940. That makes me 83 right now, going to be 84. I spent my childhood there, and I at 17, I enlisted. So I, I was about 120 pounds when I was in high school, and I went out for football because I loved football. We used to play in the park all the time. I went out for football. Well, it was a pretty big metropolitan city outside of New York. It's near Rutherford, where the Jets play and the Giants play, and I got killed. I mean, it was like I couldn't take the dummy down, so I said, I don't think this is my sport. So my parents were both came over from Scotland before I was born. My sister was born over. My older sister was born over there. So they were both immigrants to this country, and they came over, and just about the time, when the depression was getting pretty bad, and my father came over first, and then he brought my mother over. She got pregnant, and so they sent her back home because in Britain medical was free. So they didn't come back until 5 years. So my dad didn't see his daughter until 5 years later. So yeah. So I guess so. They were immigrants. So they really had a hard time getting a job. His brothers were over here, and there was like two of them that were superintendents of apartment buildings. So my parents finally got into an apartment and became superintendents of this apartment. So my dad also finally got a job, although he was went through an entire 5-year apprentice as a carpenter in Scotland. He came over here thinking he was going to be a carpenter, and that never happened. Actually, I thought that was really pretty sad. So he went to work in a factory making camouflage for the war. My parents by no means had money. I think my dad was making about $100 a week, and so college didn't seem to be in my future. Never did seem to be my path, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I really didn't. So one day, a friend of mine said he was going to join up for the Air Force, and I loved airplanes. I used to take my bike and drive right over to Teterboro Airport, which was quite a distance from my house, and just walk around the private airplanes. I remember Arthur Godfrey used to park his plane there. So I loved airplanes. I said, oh, that's great. I'm going to join the Air Force too. So I signed a paper, and the day we had to go to Newark to raise our hand, he never showed up. So I went in without him. So that's okay. What was basic training like? Well, it was long. At that time, we had 12-week basic training, which actually they realized was too long. It was. I don't think it was tough. I mean, the first few days you get there and say, what the hell did I get into? It's quite an awakening. You went to Lackland Air Force Base. It's hot, and I went in September, so it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. So yeah, I remember you had to watch. you had to take turns at night, and I mean, starting right away, you had to take turns for about an hour of barracks watch. So everybody would, somebody would get up and get dressed, and they would be barracks watch, and you could hear the guys crying at nighttime. Same thing. It's like, oh, and some of them would actually call for their mother. Really, it was like, because once you get off the bus, everything's fine. But once you get off the bus, things changed very rapidly. So, yeah, just getting used to it. I went to a technical school, jet engine and missile mechanic, and I was so glad I was going to get out of Texas. I didn't like Texas. It's so flat. So I was so glad when I got out of Texas. So when I got my orders, my orders were to go to Sheppard Air Force Base back in Texas, at Wichita Falls, Texas, which is up in the northern part. So I came from San Antonio, which is the southern part. I had, a 2-week leave or whatever it was, and then back to Texas again to Wichita Falls for, I don't know how long tech school was. It was probably 4-5 months, something like that, on jet engine mechanics. The only thing I remember is getting off the bus from Newark at my hometown, and I was carrying my duffel bag, and as I got off, the buckle broke, and all my clothes spilled all over the ground as I got out. So that's all I remember about that. Yeah.
How long did you end up serving for?
4 years. Actually, it was during the Cold War, the latter part, the 2 years I went in September of '58, and from about 59, 60, we were in the Cold War, with Khrushchev, and the Crystal went through the Cuban Missile Crisis, so Kennedy became president. So when I went in, Eisenhower was the president, and then halfway through, I was President Kennedy, and during the missile crisis, they extended everybody a year and a day for JFK. So that, it was like, that's what it was. It was so, but it got to the point when I was ready to get out. I think things were being resolved, and so I actually got out when I was supposed to. I never did serve any extra time. So, wow, yeah, a lot of what we call TDY, temporary duty. I was stationed at Westover Air Force Base here in Chicopee, Mass. It was a SAC base, Strategic Air Command, and I was a field maintenance. So I was out in the flight line all day, every day. So I was also on the alert team. So anytime there would be an alert, and there was a lot during the last couple of years because of the Russia thing, I had a bag packed with all kinds of clothes, with winter clothes to summer clothes to my underwear to a toothbrush. It was it was located at the hangar. So all I had to do was arrive, grab my bag, get on the plane. So I traveled to Zaragoza, Spain, which was very interesting because that was under a dictatorship at the time. We spent, what we were doing then, I was in the air refueling wing, which was KC-135's And we had both a bomber wing, 99th, and I was the 45th Air Refueling Wing. And I did a lot of flying, refueling with the planes. And so I went to Zaragoza, Spain, which was very interesting in that it being a dictatorship, we were allowed to go into town. I was there for like, I guess about a week and a half or 2 weeks. And I'll never forget that seeing all these soldiers, all dressed in green, with machine guns on practically every corner. So it's like you didn't mess up. And of course, we were not allowed to wear uniforms in town. We were dressed in civilian clothes. But that really was a rude awakening. It really was a rude awakening. So after that, I've been to Goose Bay, Labrador, which was really quite cold. And that was in the wintertime too. So I do remember working out in the flight line up there, and I remember trying to keep warm. We used to have these portable lights that you could, if you had to work at nighttime, they'd bring out these lights that had a generator in there that would give you the light. And I remember crawling inside that thing once just to keep warm. They gave us heaters, with the flexible tube, but that would melt the snow, and then you're standing in a puddle of water, cold water. So, but anyway, so I went there. I did quite a few trips across country, California, Louisiana, various places like that. At that time, rank was frozen. All promotions were frozen. I don't know for how long, but I ended up as an E4, which was a Airman First Class. I think they've changed they've reversed that whole thing now, but I was an Airman First Class, and that's when I left, I was still an Airman First with 3 stripes. Oh, I don't know if there's medals. I was named Airman of the Month, Wing Airman of the Month. So that was quite an honor. I had to go up in front of the colonel and get presented with a certificate, and they had my picture taken, and it was a little embarrassing because my picture was in every mess hall. So you go in there, and it's like, oh, there's the guy that's airman of mine. You didn't want to be standing out like that, but anyway, it was an honor. Yeah. Oh, we had a very close group. In fact, like I said, there was no promotion, but they didn't move us. We had a group that stayed. I don't remember people leaving that much. We stayed pretty much together because we had a very good group we all worked together. And, sometimes when you have a major problem, an engine change or 2 engine changes or something like that, you have to learn that, when you attack the job, you know exactly what you're going to do and the other guy's going to do, so you all work together. It was, but after that, we all went our separate ways. I don't know whether I left first or whatever. But I thought we all came in about the same time, and I don't know where the rest of them went. The guy that didn't show up went after my girlfriend, and that was terrible. Yeah. That never worked out anyhow, but it was still, it's like, I said, you creep. I wish I could have found him.
Do you attend any functions or reunions?
Did I attend?
Do you attend any functions or reunions for your unit?
No.
Did you ever take advantage of the GI Bill?
Oh, absolutely.
What did you do?
Yep. When I got out, actually, if I hadn't gotten out, I'm sure I would have been sent to Vietnam because Vietnam was heating up at the time in '62, and about '63, so around there, it was starting to heat up. We were already taking we were flying fighters over, and they can't get across the Atlantic by themselves. So we were a tanker, and I thought that was one of the thrills, was just to lay in the boom operators a pod, as they called the pod, and just watch them refueling. They would refuel fighters and bombers and B-52s, B-1s, B-47s, stuff like that. It's really, suddenly you're looking down at just sky and clouds, and all of a sudden you see this immense airplane come up about 60 yards away from you. It's like, wow, it's amazing, amazing. What are my hopes for the future?
Yeah.
Stay alive. Yeah.
Is there any advice you'd give anyone who's considering going into the Air Force?
Oh, I think it was the best thing I ever did. When you asked me about the GI Bill, you had an option. You could either use it for a house loan, or you could use it for education. Well, one of the reasons I got out was I saw staff sergeants who were above me. They were going to leave, and I'm saying, that's telling me something, that a guy that may have spent 5, 6, 7, 8 years already, and he's getting out. The last year, they put me in charge of the night shift, and so I had a lot of responsibility at that time. And so my boss, who was a chief master sergeant, he got a hold of me and said, "Kid," he said, "get the hell out of here and go to college." He said, "You're too smart." So, which I never felt that way when I was in school. I was an average C student. I was not a brainiac, and it just my success in the Air Force. I was 20 years old, and I was running. I was certified to run, the 4-engine KC-135, which is essentially a 707, and I could run that at full throttle. Back then, the engines had water injections instead of the big fans they have today, and the only time I needed a pilot to sit with me would be as if we were testing water injection, because that increases the thrusts that much. And I remember once jumping the chocks because the thrust is so great. So, but anyhow.
What did you study in college?
Engineering. Yep. As soon as I got home, I got a job at Curtiss-Wright Aircraft in New Jersey, and I had met my wife already. So that was another reason I got out. So she lived in York, Maine, and my family used to vacation up there. So I took a leave when the rest of my family came up from New Jersey and went to York Beach, and she was working in the Goldenrod, and we met, and she was still in high school, and I was in the service. Her father wasn't happy about that because he worked at the Kittery Navy Yard, and he said, "Oh, military guy. Oh, no, you're not going out with a military guy." But anyhow, it worked out, and we just celebrated our 60th anniversary this year. So I guess it worked. So that was a benefit. But yeah, I would recommend anybody that doesn't know what they want to do is to go, because you really grow up. I mean, you have to grow up, but you grow up, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. When I was going to college in Newark, I was going to Newark College of Engineering, which is now part of Rutgers. And I was going at nights because I needed to work. I needed a job. Like I said, I started at Curtiss-Wright Aircraft, and I hated that. It was just tearing down jet engines, and it was a union place, and it was like, so I eventually got a job as a draftsman at a company in Newark, and it worked out very well because right from work, I could go to school, but that was also a very hot time in Newark when, you know, there's a lot of racial problems in there, and it was like if you didn't get to school in time, you had to park on the street, and it was kind of scary. It was kind of scary, but so I was there. I was in Newark for about 2.5 years, and the technical representative for New England left the company. So my boss recommended me to come up and take his place, knowing that my wife was from up here. And of course, we jumped at that. It's like I was probably going to do it anyhow because she was not happy taking her from York, Maine to cosmopolitan. So we lived down there. Probably a year and a half, 2 years. She had a job also. So so we came up. She had relatives in Lawrence. They got us an apartment. We stayed there probably 6 months. From there, we went to Georgetown for about a year. Our oldest son was born, Jeff, who was actually, so he was born. So we moved up to York, Maine, so my mother-in-law could take care of him while my wife worked and I worked. And I covered all of New England as a fire protection engineer for this fire protection company. And so I happened to be at Toll's Silversmith once on a survey, and I said, "Oh, it's a really nice little town." I drove around, and they were building Phillips Drive area, right there, on the west end of Newburyport. Drove down there, and the houses. I think we paid $16,000 for our first house. So I did not want to use the GI Bill. I had already been using it. So we stayed there until Jeff was about 4.5, 5 years. We sold it for $28,000 and bought 2 acres in West Newbury, and that was probably about 53 years ago now. So we've been on Garden Street, right next to the Grange, for about 53 years. So about 2 acres for $8,000. So, and built a house for 25. So needless to say, we paid that off, within, a good time. Yeah. So that's it.